Hello, Internet. Welcome to another episode of the Get Geek podcast. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to get into some Star Wars geekdom to celebrate May the 4th be with you. But first, I want to give a quick mention. As you guys know, many of our fans know, we have been recording from social distance or recording safely. We're recording remotely, all of us. So please bear with us on any issues with sound quality. We're doing the best that we can. We think it sounds pretty good, but if there are any issues, of course, bear with us because of the circumstances right now. And also, as another quick mention, if you guys could really help us out in this time with a like, share, rate, and subscribe if you're enjoying the podcast. Again, we also welcome suggestions. So you can always let us know on our Instagram at Get Geek Podcast. And of course, you can suggest our podcast to your friends, and they can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and basically anywhere that you can listen to a podcast. But before we get started, let's do our introductions. This is Jose.
This is Wolfie.
This is AJ.
Eli.
And this is Walt.
Yeah. All right, so Walt, jump in and why don't you let us know who your Star Wars character is that, just a quick explainer. Actually, we're just mentioning Star Wars characters that we think need to be expanded upon, whether in films, media, or elsewhere. So Walt, please go ahead and tell us who your character is.
All right. So one of my favorite movies is Rogue One. I think it's one of the better movies in this new era of Disney and Star Wars. And it introduced a bunch of characters that we've seen for the first time, and their backstories are unexplained at this point, except for maybe a couple of maybe fan sites or things of that nature on the internet. One of the characters that I think would be an awesome choice to get his own either TV or movie show, or TV or movie, would be the character of Chirrut Imwe, and he was played by Donnie Yen in the movie Rogue One. Like I said, his backstory is very limited. We know that he's a blind human that was born on that moon of Jeddah that we went to, and where he kind of joined the resistance or the rebellion at that point. He does have a best friend who he shares his adventures in. It's kind of like a buddy cop situation, which is Baze Malbus. And I think,
Character.
Yeah, he really, really is. And my suggestion is if they ever did do a Chirrut thing, I think he's better served in the TV space as opposed to the movie space, because I think it gives us more time to spend with him, especially with his backstory. But it also gives us the added bonus to be able to see how Baze and him met, and how they progressed together and became the friends that you saw them in Rogue One. Chirrut again is blind. We don't know if he's force sensitive, but it is heavily hinted in the movie that he is, right?
Yeah.
Right. I am one with the Force, and the Force is with me. One of the coolest
Which is
lines, honestly, in Star
another.
Wars.
Yeah, that phrase right there is quickly becoming one of the iconic phrases in Star Wars. It hasn't hit "May the Force be with you" levels, but if you see Clone Wars and mild spoiler, you may hear that phrase coming up. So I'll just leave it at that because I don't want to spoil the show. Which, sidebar. Please watch Clone Wars, especially the last 3 to 4 episodes. There is a noticeable difference in that show. They actually give it a movie quality and a movie beginning. Usually when you watch Clone Wars, they have the propaganda stuff.
Yeah, which is funny, though. I like that.
Yeah, but these last ones... I contend that you make this into a movie, and it's actually a better movie than some of the movies that we've seen on film right now for Star Wars.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean,
Yeah,
especially
but
with the caliber of the characters that
oh
actually have
my
become so
gosh,
important,
it is
like
so awesome, and
Ahsoka Tano, right? Who's
how
so
it
huge
blends
now.
into Revenge of the Sith is awesome. But anyway, I digress because
Hmm.
we're not talking about that.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, like I said, Chiru, he's a guardian of the wills, and those guys, they're monks who protect the Jedi artifacts and stuff like that.
Yep.
And to me, just watching him operate in Rogue One, he's kind of like a Star Wars daredevil, so to speak, because the way that he fights, and it's amazing, and he had that one amazing moment where he's chanting, I am with the force and the force is with me, and he walks in the middle of the battlefield, you know what I'm saying, to try and turn off that switch, or turn it on, in Rogue One. That was just amazing. I think he's a really good candidate to have his own show, just because to me, he's an awesome character. I don't know what you guys think.
Well, I mean, I honestly like just off the bat, like watching Donnie Yen in anything to me is enjoyable, and he really was a
Agreed.
huge part of what made this character so awesome because not only that line, but the moments and the ways in which he delivers the line, especially obviously as you mentioned that moment near the end when he's walking through laser fire through the battlefield calmly in a collected monk-like warrior fashion, just walks through everything just to flip that switch. That whole scene is one of the best scenes in the movie and one of the best scenes in all Star Wars movies, in my opinion. I think it's at least top 10, just for the quality of the character moment and the quality of like how cool the action is and how cool it is that what he's doing. So for me, like, yeah, if you obviously you got to cast Donnie Yen in this role, you cannot cast anyone else. Just like they're using Diego Luna for the Cassian Andor show.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, if you're making a Cassian Andor show as a spinoff, well, first of all, they probably should have made a show for the main character. But that's another conversation entirely. But yes,
So you're talking about
you're
Jaina
making
Erso?
yeah, Jyn Erso. I mean, she is the main character of the movie. They should have given her a little bit more backstory, maybe, even though they have some in the movie. That's
Mm-hmm.
not my that's not my pick necessarily. It's just a couple of quick opinions. But yeah, like if Cassian Andor is getting a backstory, and he's a cool character too. Don't get me wrong. Chirrut Imwe is a natural choice for somebody that should get a TV show, like you said, because a movie, one adventure, just wouldn't be enough with this character.
Right. And I think
Mhm.
it'll be awesome just to have him, seeing how he kind of, hooks up with Baze and stuff. And
Mhm.
those two characters in the movie had great chemistry. Imagine if you elongate that into a series form, you know what I'm saying? Just to
Mhm.
see those two guys play against each other. Like I said, it's the ultimate buddy cop type of thing.
Which would work really well within the Star Wars universe because it would be a genre that hasn't been explored. And if anything, that's something that Star Wars could benefit from. That's why Rogue One was probably so awesome. I think those of us that like it agree it's because it wasn't like every other Star Wars movie. It was a different genre. It was a war movie. And that's something that made it really, really interesting. So why not extend that into TV shows for some of these characters who aren't Jedi,
Yeah, I
which I
think
think is
the
also important.
closest relationship that we have currently in Star Wars would be kind of like Han Solo and Chewbacca. How they play against each other. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. I guess you're probably right in that regard, and also in like two characters who are highly regarded in the Star Wars universe that again are not Jedi. That
Exactly.
that people really, really are interested in hearing their story. Yeah, Chirrut Imwe would be an awesome choice, and Baze. I mean, I think yeah, like you said, you definitely have to add Baze to it in order to make it work, just to explore their relationship.
Yep. And so that's my choice for a character that I believe could have his own thing in the Star Wars universe. Um,
Awesome, awesome.
Eli,
Mhm.
you're up next. Who do
Tell
you
us.
think?
What you got?
You guys are gonna get angry.
We
Uh,
always do whenever you speak. Let's just
yeah,
clarify
Par
that.
for the course.
You make
yeah,
us angry by hating everything that we love, Eli. But that's
I,
okay. That's your opinion.
yeah.
No, go ahead.
That's
Go ahead.
that's my thing. But anyway, I changed my character. I know we were supposed to come up with one before the podcast,
Mhm.
and we were supposed to explain. But anyway,
That's cool.
Valkorion. Not so many people know about this character unless you
Interesting.
know what Legends is. And yeah, I think that he deserves a movie.
What about him is it that you really think would make him good in a movie? What do you like about his character?
Well, it's just such a mysterious character, I think.
Hmm.
And given the fact that he was like it
Explain who he is.
okay, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Valkorion was, I think he was he was a human warrior from the planet Zakul
Hmm.
who lived centuries before the Galactic War. So, he was actually, it's not actually Valkorion who I want as a movie.
Hmm.
It's Vitate, because they're basically one and the same.
Okay.
Vitate is actually, he's like a force entity. And he needs a host. So he goes and possesses Valkorion and uses him to take over the Eternal Empire, and he lives thousands of years, so he's considered the immortal emperor, I believe.
Hmm.
So he's a very mysterious character and a very, like, I don't know, how would you say it,
What do you mean?
like a very mysterious character. And
Well, first of all, he's not a character that a lot of people know
yeah,
unless they're really really deep into the Star Wars Legends universe.
yeah,
Um, and yeah, he there is an aura of mystery around him because he is the immortal Sith
emperor,
Emperor, right?
yeah,
And the circumstances of how he became that is pretty interesting because he's not a person that has been infused with force powers. He's a person that has been basically possessed
by the
with an
force,
entity that has force powers. You know what I'm
yeah.
saying? And so that to me is a pretty interesting. It's almost you can almost kind of make a Star Wars horror movie out of this.
Yes, that is what I was looking for.
That
Almost
would be
like
awesome. Hmm.
the part from Rogue One where it's like Vader just slashing through the entire shuttle. That's what I see, and that's the potential I see in this
Oh
character.
God.
I want it
That's
to
really
be a
interesting.
horror movie.
That's really
God.
interesting because I feel like from the little that I know of Valkorian, or the entity in the situation, this can almost be like the precursor to and the explanation to how Palpatine can transfer his mind and soul to these different bodies and stuff. It could be like, where
Well,
Palpatine got the power or learned the power to transfer, his entity to another body and stuff, because that's what it seems like goes on with Valkorian, that like, the Sith entity is just using these, bodies to continue on living, which is, what makes him immortal.
well,
Yeah, and it would definitely help. I think the Star Wars backstory in general because that's a Sith power that's never fully been explained, and it's been so heavily leaned on in a lot of different stories. Honestly, like I mean, it's been slightly explained, but the way that the Sith kind of have their I guess their force ghost attached to people or to items or to locations. Like if
I
you
already have
explain
that.
this character more, this Valkorian character more, and give him more of a backstory, you can open that up and explain that a little bit better so that we can start to understand some of the things that happened even in some of the more recent movies that shall not be
Right.
named.
uh, but I mean, like,
Yeah,
I don't know. I'm trying, with everything that happened in Rise of Skywalker, I'm trying to lean
shall not
away
be named.
from Star Wars, the franchise, and I
Hmm.
just want it to get in. Well, not the franchise. Sorry, the Skywalker saga. I just want this to be a completely different, and I don't want it to be those PG 13 movies, PG-13 Star Wars movies, where it's like,
Interesting.
oh, we did it! It's a happy ending. Oh my god, the kids are gonna love this. No, I want death, complete
Oh God,
horror.
Jesus!
I want it like Anakin, how he used to do it, murdering children's
Oh my
millions of
God,
kids, head
millions!
chop. Yes,
He didn't murder
I mean, from what I heard
millions.
from him,
But
what I
it's what he
heard about
wants.
him, yeah, what I heard about him was like it was crazy. Like, didn't he like destroy a planet or something just with
Yeah, he was a
Valkyrian
pretty
or
powerful Sith.
yeah,
You
okay.
know.
Mhm.
very powerful.
Okay, I guess I'll go next.
All right. All right.
This one was a little tough. Originally, I was gonna go for Bosk. The reason why I didn't go for Vader
I knew it.
is
I knew it.
because, well, hold
Mhm.
on. The
Mhm.
reason why I didn't go for Vader is because he's still the golden boy so far. I don't want even the possibility of them messing that up. I really don't. So I was gonna pick Bosk, but I didn't pick Bosk either. I picked the Huts.
No,
Ooh,
no.
Ooh, the
I
hut.
like that
And
one
this is
actually.
why I say
Whoa.
the Huts.
That could make for an interesting
For
genre show.
some reason, inexplicably,
Mhm.
these slugs have little to no range of motion, yet they command the most respect out of all the bounty hunters and the scumbags of the criminal underworld. I want to
Yo.
know why.
Yo, okay, you know
And
what?
you know what? This would also be a very good opportunity to flesh out other characters' story, like say Bosk. Maybe
Mhm.
even get a mention to how Boba Fett got his startup. Things like that.
Crimson Dawn.
Yeah. Ties
Yo.
with other criminal organizations.
Ball.
There are a lot of
That's really
ways.
good. That's
There are a
Mhm.
lot of ways that the Huts alone can branch out while also embellishing their own story. So that's why I picked them.
That would be
Damn.
awesome.
that would be really really interesting because it allows the universe to give, you know, to lend some limelight to these characters that maybe don't necessarily need a whole show, or who can stay and remain mysterious and stuff. You know, the interactions between Darth Vader and Jabba and Boba and stuff, and like, you know, all these like little side stories, but from the point of view of the Huts. That's awesome.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I agree because they've been so integral to the story of Star Wars since the very beginning. Jabba the Hutt, like basically even from the first movie, if we all those of us that remember the deleted scene with the human Jabba that was then turned into the CGI Jabba in the special edition movies. But I mean, as I quickly mentioned, and just to expand upon it, I think that the genre that you could put this show in, you could make this an edgier Star Wars TV
Yes.
show
That's
with a, you
also
know,
what I was going for.
yeah,
It's also
exactly. I mean,
interesting
if you're
because
like
there was a
talking
video
about the
game that was
underworld,
supposed to come out.
hmm
I'm
go ahead,
sorry.
Walt. No, go
No,
ahead.
there was a Star Wars video game that was supposed to come out called 1313. I don't know if you guys are aware of that.
Yes, I remember that, and it got
Yeah,
canceled. They just showed like the demo of it or whatever. It looked amazing.
exactly. And
Um,
while they weren't going to
wasn't George
focus on the
Lucas also?
Huts,
No, I'm
what was
sorry.
that?
George Lucas was involved in a TV show. That
Yeah,
was, yeah, that's something different. But I remember the game as well. Go ahead.
yeah, but those two things were going to introduce you know, the seedy underworld of Star Wars. 13 was specifically going to follow Boba Fett and his interactions with the Coruscant underworld. And
hmm
I think the series that you are referring to was going to be more of a generalized thing where it's more gangster and more of that type of ilk. So,
Right,
you know,
but that's what
the
it could turn
idea
into, I
was
guess.
there. Yeah,
hmm
the idea was there, but they just never, you know, moved forward with it, you know?
They just love
Yeah,
to cancel anything Boba. That's why.
I mean, yeah, I guess that's. I don't know why. Yeah, like a lot of the underworld or like slightly different genre tales have been canceled. They're
I
just.
just
I mean,
really like killing off Boba. I
I
hate
mean,
it.
it may be like you said, he's one of those smaller characters that can't quite hold his own
He is
show.
not. Oh my god. He is not. Oh my god.
Oh, damn.
Listen, the comment didn't come from me this time.
He's not.
I was
He's
gonna
not.
do
What?
it.
He's one of the biggest characters in Star Wars. How can you even say that?
I was gonna say, yeah,
I'm
like
just messing. I'm just messing.
Sure, you are.
with all due true respect,
Hey,
and with
I
all,
made this choice so that I could be all inclusive with the bounty hunters. Okay, give me
but I mean,
that at least.
in honesty, if you look at it, Boba Fett got expanded upon almost more than any character from the original trend, at least not the main characters, you know, the Luke Skywalkers and the Han Solos. Of the other characters, he got expanded upon a lot. And I mean,
He's the
if you
most
look at it from that
expanded
angle,
character that doesn't actually have an actor tied to him.
yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean, I don't even know. I mean, if I'm thinking back about it, I have no idea who played the original Boba Fett in the movies.
Three
Now that
different
I
people
think about
played the original Boba Fett.
three people and
Three
three
different
different
people.
people.
Yeah, three different people.
Wow.
Three different
So
stunt
probably,
actors.
so probably the one that not to make light of this, but the one that had that incident with the Sarlacc pit was different from the one that said
Yeah.
no disintegrations, was different from
Yeah.
one of the other ones.
Yeah.
Ah, okay. So that explains that a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, clearly there's a market for some of the Star Wars characters who aren't traditional heroes. And you know, we had this discussion before talking about who's anti-heroes versus who's not anti-heroes. I believe that Boba Fett is an anti-hero. If you look at his backstory after the movies were made in the Star Wars Legends canon, he's definitely a little bit of an anti-hero character. So you could make the case that he would be a good hero for a television show. I mean, he's very much like the Mandalorian in many ways. He's just a guy that wants to get the job done most of the time, but sometimes he gets pulled into the greater heroics. But yeah, I mean, just to expand upon the whole underworld of Star Wars would be, I think, pretty incredible, especially since we've been teased by that before.
Yeah, I agree actually. I think that one of the things that's missing the most from from Star Wars is proper building. You know, like Star Wars is such a huge, entity when you do include, the some of the greater stories that we've gotten from Legends and stuff like that, and from past video games and all, that I feel like the movies, especially when they had the opportunity to do so with the the sequel saga, that they
Mm-hmm.
didn't really expand on the world. They showed a few different scenes, but that's not world building to me. That's just like ad hoc, introduction of certain elements of the Star Wars universe. But they had an opportunity to visit different kind of planets instead of remaking certain planets or revisiting planets and systems and other elements of that. So I
Yeah, and
feel
when
like that
they
was like kind of a missed opportunity with the
I
sequel
think
saga.
I think one of the biggest failings of the sequel saga is the fact that they were too beholden to what came before it. Instead of trying
Yeah,
to push the story forward, they just kept on the sequel saga to me, except for Last Jedi, but the sequel saga to me was just one big Easter egg to the original trilogy.
right,
You know, they
right,
didn't do
and
anything. They
to
didn't do anything original.
to Wolfie's point, it's true. Like if you saw any of the old planets, of any of the original planets or locations from earlier Star Wars canon, they didn't really do much with it. It was just there just to be there. It was like, hey, we're on Tatooine just because, or like whatever other planets they ended up visiting. They just show up there. They don't expand on like the history of the planet. Like, you know, they don't tell you anything more than what you already know. And then they add these new planets, as they always are in Star Wars. They're either desert planets or snow planets. Like there's really only two planets, it seems, in the Star Wars
Yeah,
universe.
that's true.
Yeah.
Right, most of
Forest
the time.
planets.
Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
those are like the only three that you'll see for the most part, and then you have like a Coruscant where like it's just a gigantic city is the entire planet, but like you basically see all the same types of planets in Star Wars, and it just gets cookie cutter after a while. It's like, oh, here's another desert planet. Like here's Ray's planet that's exactly the same as Luke Skywalker's planet, basically.
It's just
Yeah.
backdrop. That's it. Like
Yeah,
it's just
yeah.
backdrop, and they don't do anything with it. You know, I think they fall back too much on the character lore,
Hmm.
um, as opposed to giving life to the environment that they're in. You know what I mean? Because it is true. Like we've been probably to like 4 or 5 different desert like planets. They all just look like Tatooine, and I just always assumed that we're on Tatooine. You know,
Yeah, a hundred
so
percent.
things like that. So
I mean, take a look at Mandalorian. For the longest time, we thought that at the very beginning we might be in Tatooine and whatnot.
yeah.
You know, until finally we found out that it wasn't. Um, I'm this is something that I've said multiple times on this podcast, and I'm gonna make it really really quick because I know we're not talking about this, but
Hmm.
the fanboy in me just appreciates what Dave Filoni does with his work in the animated space, and that's why I keep pushing the issue that he really needs to get more and more involved in the live action space, because
He needs to be
what
the
he
Kevin
does
Feige.
that's so different from the other ones is that, yeah, he goes and he revisits planets, but then he builds on that mythology and he builds on that world building. It's not just enough for him to go to Tatooine and say, hey, we're on Tatooine. No, he puts in different wrinkles that actually make the live action stuff even better, and that's what I think is missing right now, you know. But
Yeah,
again,
I mean,
we're not talking about this, so we're talking about the things, but I just had to put it in there since the conversation went that way.
I'll just to expand on that briefly again, like you said, we're not really talking about it, but like most of the time when he brings you back to a planet from the original trilogy or something like that, he shows you how it's changed, which is what's interesting. If you look
Right.
at most of the other movies and indeed the sequel trilogy, nothing has changed on these planets for the most part. Nothing at all has changed. So and to put it very succinctly for me, when's the last time we got a place that we can refer to as a wretched hive of scum and villainy and be like, yeah, that place is awesome. That's one of the best Star Wars locales. Like that has some of the best lore. I can't think of a place besides I mean, there are other places, but there's no place as iconic as like the original location that they expanded upon, which is Mos Eisley Spaceport in a way.
Hmm.
Where are those other locations? I think that that's something that's missing. And I think to get back to AJ's point, or to AJ's suggestion, you can do that really, really well by making the Hutts a main character of a TV show.
So what's yours, Gabe?
So I'm for before I go on to mine, I'm
Hmm.
actually now really, really sad that the Java, series or whatever is it's not a real thing. I love the idea
Hmm.
of a Java like series or movie that gives us a place to put all the outlaw type of stuff that goes on in the Star Wars world. Things that have to do with like, dark Jedi and gray Jedi and the bounty hunters, a place where like there is no good. There's just people trying to survive and make ends meet in lawless areas. So that would be absolutely awesome. I love that suggestion.
Yeah.
Um my suggestion is one that like again, it's like I feel like a lot of my suggestions are based on stuff from when I was growing up, in anything that we do, whether it's
Hmm.
comic stuff, movie stuff, the heroes stuff. But for me, it's gonna be Revan. I feel like Revan deserves not just a series or just a movie, but a series of movies. And the reason I say that is because if you ever played Knights of the Old Republic, which is one of my, I would say it's the first real 3D um, RPG that I played aside from Final Fantasy, which Final Fantasy played a little bit like kind of like a top view game. This is like the first one that I played, and one of the things that was great about Knights of the Old Republic is that the choices that you made in the game really really affected the story, not in a minimal way, but in a huge way, because
Hmm.
you start off as this
Huge.
character who, based on your decisions, you either go light or dark path. And I don't necessarily want to spoil people on the game, but at the same time, that game is many, many decades old. Well, not many decades old, but many years old. So The story behind it is that you start off essentially as Revan, but you don't know that you're Revan until later in the game. And I think that that's a great storyline to put into the universe, because we can start, we can make a movie of Revan's character as the human Jedi, um, and
Hmm.
everything, and explain how he was brainwashed by the Jedi and had his memory wiped. And at some point, let's say in the second film or the end of the first film, he realizes that he was not part of the light side, that he's actually part of the dark side, and he becomes Darth Revan. And we can see the Darth Revan film in the second movie. And even, and this is why I say it should be like a trilogy, because in the second movie we can show how he was actually originally a Jedi that fell into the Sith, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So we have like this, like a bunch of really key turns that we can have at the end of each film that will really kind of flesh out who Revan is, what the Knights of the Old Republic era was, how amazing it was. And the other thing about Revan that I really, really enjoyed is the fact that this is really kind of the start of the Skywalker saga, you could say.
It's the
You
start of
know,
everything
it's the
in
start
a
of
very
everything.
real
It is,
way.
yeah, and what I mean by that, for the our Star Wars fans that aren't super deep in that old knowledge, is um Revan represents that original story of a Jedi that fell to the Sith, very much like Anakin did, and kind of like the original story of like, hey, you need a, for the Jedi to, be careful of the temptations of the dark side, because you can be, like Revan and what happened to him. But aside from that, you also have the very initial prophecy is told to Revan about Anakin Skywalker, and
Hmm.
how he can bring like, the dangers that he has to bring balance to the Force, because at this point he becomes Darth Revan. He, if I remember correctly, he is contacted, or he communicates with a Sith entity. Sorry if you hear my dogs in the background. They really want. I think they want to go for a walk. But he communicates with a Sith entity,
Hmm.
uh, that kind of explains to him, what he needs to do to take control of the Sith and like really win this original war, against the Jedi, but then warns him about the son. Or I believe, I'm a little bit fuzzy on the backstory. I don't have notes in front of me, but warns him about like the lineage and Anakin Skywalker as to the prophesized being that can bring balance to the Force, and tear down all of the Sith plans and stuff. So, um, and yeah, I think it'd be absolutely awesome to see, Rev. Plus, he uses two lightsabers. So he uses a blue, I believe, a blue and a red one. One from,
Ouch. Nope.
no,
It's purple. It's purple,
it's
man.
purple. Both of
Purple.
them,
Red and purple.
red and purple. Right, right,
Makes
Oh,
sense though. That signifies his struggles between light and dark,
right,
which
right.
is cool. Hmm.
And that's the thing. I think that like that's one of the best things. And the other thing too is that we could also kind of leave it almost in the hands of the viewer to suggest whether he's truly light or truly dark. That never ending struggle that we always see being told in the Star Wars universe. Between Anakin, Luke, uh, Luke and Ben Solo. um this is like the original struggle story between light and dark. So
Yes, I love this idea because those of you that know me know that Knights of the Old Republic and Knights of the Old Republic 2 are actually some of my favorite Star Wars tales of all time. And Wolfie's right. Like, there's so much setup here. There's an
yeah.
enormous amount of setup for all of Star Wars because somehow, strangely enough, when you look at it, like Knights of the Old Republic, Knights of the Old Republic 2, of course, by virtue of the fact that they take place thousands of years before the original trilogy, they explain a million different things that didn't get explained even in the movies. They explain to
Hmm.
more detail the rule of two with the Sith, which is something that didn't get expanded upon until later on, I believe, in the Legends universe.
Right, because he's he like Darth Revan is essentially the inception of the Rule of Two story.
No, I don't think that was it. I think he was
He-
the rebirth of it, because if you remember,
no,
there was
yes, but I'm
another.
saying as far as like
Darth Bane.
Yes.
yes,
See? Exactly. So there, but he's connected to it in a huge way, and he connects it to the let's, I guess we'll call it the original trilogy. He connects the old Sith teachings, the old Jedi teachings, the old Jedi wars that took place. He connects all of that into the main timeline, and there's a reason why I think we might see this too if you look at it, because there's the rumors of the Star Wars TV show are that it's going to be a Knights of the Old Republic TV show, right? Or an Old Republic TV show. And there's rumors that
isn't
they're
that the High Republic, or is that the movies? The High Republic era is the movies that's coming up, the new
I
movies,
think
or
you might be
Yeah.
right. I do know that
Yeah.
we're going to get a telling of that in a movie or a TV show, or at least there's a huge, heavy rumor that that's going to happen from what we've heard so far, right? And then you also look at the fact that there's rumors that they're planning to possibly remaster and re-release Knights of the Old Republic. So there's a good chance for you to take a character like Revan, or indeed some of the other awesome characters in 1 and 2, like Kreia in Knights of the Old Republic 2 is a really great character as well. Revan, Bane, all of these characters can be expanded upon and brought into, let's say, the canon, in quotes, or at least into live action canon, or even animated. I wouldn't really care how they do this as long as they expand upon it. I think it's a great choice, a really great choice.
yeah,
And
I
with
think it's
Revan,
mhm.
I'm sorry. With
No, no problem.
Revan, you also have the ability to recreate that Empire Strikes Back "I'm your father" moment for the new generation,
Hmm.
because I remember playing that game, and the revelation that you're playing as Darth Revan was one of the biggest shocks that I think I've ever had in a video game. You
Yeah,
know,
agreed.
so you could put that in the film space, and that, like I said, that literally becomes the "I am your father" moment for a new generation of Star Wars viewers,
100%.
especially the ones that haven't played the game.
Yeah, I can see that. And then if they play the new game, if they make the new game as is rumored, then we can see a huge expansion of the Star Wars universe in general. And there's other characters in those games that are not Jedi. I mean, connecting it back a little bit, that's another. There's a big element of the Mandalorian story that gets told in these games as well, because you have the Mandalorian characters in both games.
Right, absolutely. I mean, the connection between the Mandalorian characters is that when, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but if when Revan was leading the Jedi, he was leading the Jedi against the Mandalorian in the Jedi Mandalorian War, and that I
Hmm.
think would be an awesome way to kind of bring in a Mandalorian origin story aside from having a TV show and stuff like that. It would kind of give us a little bit more background on the Mandalorians as a whole, without having to give the Mandalorians as a species their own film or their own their own TV show. Where I think that like things like this should be more explained in backstory or ad hoc stories that are part of a different kind of movie or TV show and stuff like that. So um, yeah, I think that it would be absolutely awesome to have a Revan storyline. I think that this really is the angle that they can give us a new set of movies in a completely different timeline that does not necessarily touch the Skywalker saga at all, but still kind of gives us that kind of Darth Vader. Anakin Skywalker storyline a little bit of like, hey, I'm gonna fall in love with Revan, then oh no, he turns bad, then oh no, it's not that he's just bad, he's struggling and all that stuff. So while giving us the I would say the originator for the Star Wars saga as we know it today.
Yeah, it would be. I agree. That would be an absolutely fantastic choice. And if it weren't your choice, if I didn't have another one in mind, I guess that's maybe a little cliche. That would probably be one of my second or third choices, because he's such a good character and it's
Yeah.
such a good story. Hmm. So let me jump into who my character is. And as I said, it's a little cliche, but I think it's really very easily the Star Wars character, the biggest Star Wars character who we have no info about, really. I mean, we have a little bit of his backstory that's told in the prequel trilogies and in the Clone Wars, but we don't know really much else about this character, and that character is Yoda, who's honestly one of my favorite characters in all of fiction.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
little miniature Buddha right there. That guy is awesome. Empire Strikes Back, him in those movies, some of my favorite moments, some of my favorite lines that I remember from watching that movie when I was like 4 or 5 years old, back in the 80s. And I mean, it's really, really easy to me to make this choice for the simple fact that we don't know what race Yoda is, and we have never seen, well, not never, but we've almost never seen another member of his race except for Yaddle in the sequel, in the prequel trilogies, excuse me, the female Yoda character that's on the Jedi Council, right? And the child, or baby Yoda, who still doesn't tell us anything about what Yoda's race is. Although I am a little hopeful, because if you look at it here, what they're doing, I think, with the child is they're trying to expand a little bit on obviously what Yoda's race is, and we can see something that we've always thought to be true. It seems that Yoda's race is probably slightly more force sensitive than most other races. I've always suspected that, and if you watch The Mandalorian, as we've seen recently, it looks like that's something that they're trying to expand upon. That they're like just a race of force sensitive beings somehow. But you look at Yoda, you don't know who his family is. You've never heard of Yoda's parents. You've never heard if Yoda has any siblings or cousins. You don't know anything about where Yoda's race is, what planet they come from. I mean, did they get wiped out somehow? Are they somehow hidden from the universe? Why does Yoda never mention his planet in any interaction he has with any of the characters? I mean,
Well,
go
this
ahead.
is gonna sound kind of dumb on my part, but
Okay.
this is gonna be one of Eli's crazy fan theories kind of thing.
Okay.
So you know how there is a Sith race?
Yes.
What if they are the quote unquote Jedi
They could
race?
be. They could be. I actually
Ooh.
I think that's a pretty decent theory, honestly. I don't think that's a bad theory at
Yeah.
all. Because it would explain why Yoda is so involved in like the machinations of the universe and why he's so powerful. And it would also probably explain why his race tends not to be in the spotlight too much, because they would have a target on their back if you really think about it. If they're the Jedi, the representation of the Jedi in the universe, quote unquote, then you figure that any Sith Lord, knowing the location of their planet, would go after them all the time.
Maybe
But
that's
I
why
don't know.
there's only one Yoda left.
Maybe.
I
Yeah,
just
maybe they got wiped out somehow. But why don't we
Or
know
they're
that?
keeping themselves very well hidden.
Which is also something that would be cool. I mean, right, guys, if you look at it from this angle, there's so many cool directions they can go in with explaining what the deal is with Yoda's race. I mean, you can go like you can go in a variety of different directions, like you said, where they've been wiped out, they've been hidden, they're the Jedi race, they're not. Like, there's so many possibilities. And again, with Yoda being one of the most charismatic and awesome characters, in all of the trilogy and all of the TV shows. I mean, he has so many great moments in the sequel trilogies, or excuse me, in the prequel trilogy. You have him, fighting the Emperor or fighting Count Dooku. I mean, we all went kind of crazy at that moment, even though it was a little funny and ridiculous. It was like, okay, now we know how powerful Yoda is. And he just has all these great moments, and I would like to know what made Yoda into the being that he is. And kind of not the last point, but like another big point is he's been around for hundreds of years. How many stories can you tell about a character like Yoda and about his race when he's been around for that long? Like, how many generations of other Jedi, human Jedi or other races of alien Jedi, has he been involved in? Has he trained? Has he recruited? Like, there's so many other stories that he could even intertwine with that are already being told. as he's, being intertwined with Clone Wars and stuff like that, obviously. But there's so many other stories outside of some of these main stories that have been integral to the Star Wars canon for so long, like the Clone Wars and things like that. There's so many outside stories that Yoda can be involved in. You can expand on his relationship with Chewbacca, and then you can tell a little bit more about Chewbacca's backstory at the same time. You can make this kind of its own weird semi-buddy show, not in the same way as Chirrut Imwe and Baze, where they're always together, but you could have Chewbacca be like a really important peripheral character in Yoda's TV show, maybe, since they have such a good relationship. I mean,
Yeah.
Go ahead, Eli.
Yeah. I feel that. Okay, I just learned this, but I feel like Yoda would be a great transition into the Legends because there's one character that I'll just say his name, Marco Ragnos.
Mm-hmm.
Does nobody know who this? Am I the only one who knows who this is?
No, I know who he is. But explain for the audience a little bit, so
Yeah,
because he is a little
so
more vague who he is.
he's the Sith Lord who created Vaitate,
Mm-hmm.
and he ruled as the Dark Lord for like I don't know how long, but I don't know too much about him because I just learned about him. But yeah, he was a Sith Lord during the era of the Sith Lord's reign, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
I mean the Sith's reign, and yeah, that's all I know basically. But I feel like using Yoda would be a great way to transition into the Legends universe because
Mm-hmm.
if he dates back like hundreds of years ago, then you could probably I don't know how you can include it, but like start including like the stuff from Legends since he dates back to like hundreds of years ago. Am I the only one?
What?
No, I can see that. He might.
No, no,
Yeah,
no.
I can
I
see
agree
that.
with you as well, because that's kind of my point, Eli. I agree because of Yoda's age and because of his connection to so many different characters. You're right. He could be connected to Marco Ragnos in some way as well because of how integral he is to the story. But he's, kind of the Sith side of Yoda. I believe he ruled for like a couple hundred years, if I remember his backstory correctly. Like
Yeah.
he lived for a very long time also. So their stories probably have to intersect in some way. And can you imagine like a conflict, a fight, or something between Yoda and Marco Ragnos? Like that would be
Yeah.
insane, right?
That's
Because they're both so powerful.
yeah, that's really one of cuz I could definitely see that. After learning about him, I don't know, something about me just like that popped into my head. Especially since Marco Ragnos isn't really even a Sith. He's part Jedi, a dark
Hmm.
Jedi. So maybe like what Yoda could be his apprentice. I know that sounds a bit too over the top, but like
It's not
I
impossible though.
it
You know what I
just
mean?
popped into my head.
This conversation got me thinking.
Hmm.
What if there is a balance that the Yoda species tries to create? So I find it
Hmm.
a little interesting that the child shows up after Yoda has been killed. What if they send one of their species out into the universe to at
To
least
help
keep the Jedi afloat?
bring the
Oh,
balance. I can
so
see that
but
too.
does he like respawn, reincarnate?
It's
No,
not
no, 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 no.
reincarnation. It's that they. This is how I think about it.
I
They
think I
have
know what
their
you're
own
saying.
planet,
Hmm.
right? They're
Hmm.
the most secluded beings on in the universe.
Yeah, have to be. Hmm.
Every so often, they will send one of their own out into the greater universe to do Force stuff.
Yes,
When that member dies, they will then send out another one.
which
Okay,
makes some
but
sense.
then
Or when they're getting old too, because I guess baby Yoda, the child, was probably born just before Yoda died, a few years before Yoda died at this point, right? Or probably
Well,
about
no, it
30, 45 years or so. Because remember, The
yeah,
Mandalorian takes place right after almost Return of the Jedi. So they were alive at the same time, but we don't know where baby Yoda was up until recently. He might have been on his home planet and they might
and
have
then they
just
shipped
sent
him
him.
out. Yeah.
after Yoda died. And I mean,
See, there you go.
Am I
And-
the only
and-
one who gets? Wait, hold on. You can go. You can go.
go ahead, Eli. What were you going to say? Go ahead.
You can. Okay.
Yeah.
Yoda kind of reminds me of Kami.
Yeah, he's kind of like a mentor character to so many other characters. It makes sense. He is kind of like a guardian or a god to a certain extent. Not a god maybe, but like he is a guardian the way that Kami is. I mean, Kami is God in Dragon Ball, so it's a little different. But yeah, it's a position that gets passed down. And I mean, just think of all the other possibilities when you think about like what was Yoda like in his prime? You know what I mean? I know he's very powerful because of his ability to project the Force. It's not just physical for him because he can make himself physically powerful with the Force. But what about like, I mean, and I know Yoda's race isn't the most physically imposing, but what about when he was young? Like, was he like way more tough and badass, or like was he more headstrong? Was he more kind of a crazy character, or naive or childish? The way that he portrays himself at first in The Empire Strikes Back, where he's a joke character, or childish in the way that the child is. Like, I want to know all these things about Yoda. I want to see a Yoda in his prime. I want to see a Yoda that makes mistakes because he's not the wise character that we see him as in, you know, The Return of the Jedi and, well, in the prequel trilogy and in the original trilogy, where he also makes mistakes. Obviously, let's not, you know, let's be fair. He makes mistakes and doesn't see the rise of the Sith. But I want to see what kinds of mistakes Yoda makes when he's, I don't know, 150 years old and he's like a teenager or something like that. Whatever the heck, however the heck they age. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think it would be awesome. And it sounds like something that you guys would be excited about. And for me, I think the biggest thing is, yeah, you can connect it to basically all of the characters that we all mentioned today. You can have Yoda in a way connected to their stories, help to launch their stories, because he's so integral to the Star Wars universe. And for me, that's why it's an easy choice that Yoda needs a huge expansion on his backstory. And I would say TV shows are the way to go. It could even be animated. It doesn't matter to me. There's great quality animated shows, as we all know. But I need to see Yoda expanded upon. I don't know what you guys think, but that's a big one for me. Yes, indeed. All right. So, I guess that does it for us for this week. We all have our slightly different and awesome choices for who can be expanded upon in Star Wars. And we hope that you're listening, Dave Filoni. We hope you're listening, Jon Favreau, and anyone else who makes cool Star Wars content. These are the stories we'd like to see. And, you know, we'd love to hear from you, the fans, as well, as to what Star Wars characters you would like to see expanded upon, again, whether in TV or film, animated or otherwise. And, you know, give us your feedback on that, because we certainly like to see what you guys think. You can reach out to us on the Get Geek podcast on Instagram. And let us know what you guys think. Maybe we could put something up and ask that question. We'll see what we can do about that. But, you know, reach out to us and let us know who you guys think should be a Star Wars character that we expand upon. And with that, that'll do it for this week's edition of the Get Geek podcast. I want to thank the crew, as always, for being with me and jumping on these great conversation topics. Again, just a quick mention, thank you guys for bearing with us while our sound quality is a little bit lower as a result of recording remotely and doing social distancing, being responsible. We hope you are all out there in the geekdom safe and responsible as well. And a reminder, guys, do us a favor, like, share, rate, and subscribe our content. Of course, as I mentioned a moment ago, you can check us out on Instagram to find out a little bit more about the podcast that we'll be releasing and the episodes we'll be releasing. That's at Get Geek Podcast. Look us up on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and wherever your favorite podcasts are sold. Once again, I want to thank everyone for joining us for this week's edition of the Get Geek Podcast, where we talk about who needs to be expanded upon in Star Wars. As always, as usual, I would like all of you out there in the internet geekdom to do what? Stay geeky, my friends. Thank you very much, and have a great week.
Peace.